Hello and welcome to the Move Well, Live Well podcast.
We are your hosts, Antonio Capasso and Dave Fell. The aim of this podcast is to motivate, inspire, and educate the masses, giving practical tips and golden nuggets on how to get moving and live a healthy and fulfilled life.
This podcast is for anybody who's wanting to exercise but struggles to get started or to make it stick. It's for anybody who's chasing goals but never seems to feel satisfied, or simply anyone who wants to live a healthier and happier life.
As a licensed sport and exercise psychologist, I use my knowledge of human behaviour and psychological theory to help both everyday people and Olympic level athletes achieve their performance and lifestyle goals.
I'm an online coach and I've built a platform through providing healthy and budget recipes and practical exercise tips to as many people as I can. I'm not the biggest, leanest, strongest or fittest coach, but I do pride myself in being the most well balanced. We want you to take away so many golden nuggets from this podcast that you'll have to eat them with milk.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Move Well, Live Well podcast. I'm of course joined with Dave again, who's just doing a little cheeky salute. This time we're looking to start speaking about prepping for the event. So obviously we've been working across a little timeline, talking about how you can use cues, use environments, how you can create goals, how you can find out your why. This time, hopefully you've found your why, you found your goal. It might be relating to an event. And now we're starting to think, okay, well, have you ever previously had a wedding, a presentation, or a meeting, or a competition that you've been stressed about? We know we have. So on today's episode, we are yet again going to start talking about doing some reverse engineering. But this time, rather than in finding that why, this time it's going to be in how to prep for the event. Dave, surely this is something that you can relate to.
100%. Few events this year, and not just for me, but for clients and friends and all these people, it's kind of like, okay, so this is an event and it's a way away, so I don't need to start prepping. And all of a sudden, people are stressing and panicking about how they're going to look, how they're going to feel, how they're going to perform. And then that leads to like taking extreme measures or doing something in a really short space of time when they should have got started a lot sooner. So basically we want to troubleshoot that for our listeners today and make sure that you know how to prep for your event, you're doing it the right way, and ultimately a way that's not going to lead to burnout, and actually that you can continue and sustain the habits and the methods that you've done to prep for that event long term as well.
Yeah, brilliant, and really nicely summarised there. And I think we'll probably again use you as a little bit of a guinea pig. You've got just a small event coming up that we'll get to later. But the reason why again we're talking about reverse engineering is because it's just so handy, right? Like whenever we speak to people, they're always just like, "Oh, I'm going to do this. Maybe I need to do that. Maybe I need to do that," and I don't really know how I'm going to feel on the day. And it's like, okay, well, how about we start from where you would like to be on the actual come race day, come competition day. Could be a match, could be a netball tournament, could be a wedding, right? How would you like to feel? How would you like to look? What position would you like to be in? Okay, well now what steps we need to start putting into place in order to work back from there that are going to make it most likely for you to think, feel, and be able to act in a way that will help make that a successful event. Make sense?
That sounds good to me. Let's run it, baby.
Perfect. Yeah. So the first thing we want to use, and I've mentioned it in a previous episode, I think a few episodes ago now, is the power and the tool called visualization. Dave, what can you remember about visualization?
Well, visualization, and again, it's not just like closing your eyes and daydreaming about what it is. And I'm sure you'll tell our listeners in greater depth about the tools and all the stuff like that. But it's genuinely putting yourself in the shoes of you on that event day and thinking not just about like how it's going to go, but also how are you going to feel? What are some potential triggers? What does success or look like, or how does that make you feel? And just to put into context about how important visualization is before you then get into the nitty-gritty of it, Alan Richardson in the 1960s did an experiment which is basically free throwing exercise with a load of basketball players, and there was 3 groups: people that did the physical training, group B, which did visualization, and imagine themselves and visualize themselves throwing free throws into the hoops, and then Group C, which did nothing at all. So how it panned out was that the physical practice group improved by 24%, and the visualization group improved by 23%, and those who did nothing didn't improve at all. So that should really highlight to you guys how important visualization could be. So in actual fact, really taking that time to practice that can sometimes, and in this experiment it did, yield equal results or very similar results than actually practicing and doing the training itself.
Yeah, brilliant. So there's different ways in which we can utilize visualization to our advantage. Obviously there we spoke about the ability to do a motor skill, right, effectively and efficiently, right? So we know that when visualization is done properly, it triggers the same area and same part of the brain, okay, that is also triggered when actually doing that motor movement. So that's why it's so useful when doing like static exercise or technique. So again, if you're wanting to get good at doing like power lifts, I often will tell clients, okay, well, you can go away and you can actually, really visualize that movement. You know how it feels, and it will actually help you get better for when you're going to the gym. So you almost get those mental reps in as well as in the physical reps. Okay, so that's one way in which visualization can work. But in relation to prepping for an event, what we're actually looking at doing here, and what I do, especially with athletes, and I did this really well. I know it worked effectively because of the feedback I got with someone training for an Ironman, was actually thinking about, okay, come race day, okay, what are you most likely to think? What are you most likely? So what thoughts are likely to show up and come into your head? What are you most likely to feel in terms of like actually the physical environment itself? So what's the weather most likely to be like? For their case, they're going to be on a beach. So it's like, okay, you can feel the sand, you can feel the breeze coming off the sea, can hear different people speaking. But what we're doing is making this as lifelike as possible. So you can start being like, okay, actually come race day or come football match or netball match, whatever it is, or boxing tournament, whatever you've chosen as that goal, that event you're going to go and do, whether it is standing up on the altar or standing in front of the altar, sorry, not up on it. You might get kicked out for that.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Can we start already planning for those thoughts that will show up? Okay, so Dave, could you give me an example of a previous event you've done and some of the thoughts that showed up for you?
Let's do Barcelona Marathon this year, which was in March of this year, my first ever road marathon.
Okay. Before you cross that start line, I can imagine there was a real, almost like a wave of feelings. There was a wave of thoughts coming through, and then also the emotions that you were having to process as well, right?
Absolutely. It felt, I guess, anticipation, excitement, nervousness, and never really done an event like that. So there was a bit of, the feeling of unknown as well, and didn't really sure how it was going to pan out. But yeah, I was feeling good for it, trained hard for it. So it's one of those, but again, sometimes you just don't know what to expect.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So there we have a really nice example of those feelings you felt. But what I would look to do, and what hopefully you guys will start thinking about doing, is, okay, so we know that it's likely that these thoughts are going to show up, or these feelings of, perhaps, was it uncertainty you mentioned?
Definitely uncertainty.
Yeah, are going to show up, right? And also that fear of kind of like, you don't know, the what ifs, mm-hmm. right? The classic ones, where it's the what ifs, where we're worrying about future that we can't control. So now we know this is coming in. It's like, okay, well, we can start game plans. So we did a couple of episodes ago, we did that, like, I'm having the thought example, right? So we know that actually, okay, come race day, I'm likely to have this come in. Therefore, I need to start already training myself to do these. I'm having the thought, this is the thought, right? And understanding what's driving that. Okay, so when we understand what the role of the chimp, right? Why do you feel like you were getting those feelings of uncertainty or nerves?
I get, well, hopefully it's natural, right? In terms of, you know, when you're doing something that you've never done before, and you are working through those, but it's difficult to put into words like why you get that certain thought, you know.
Mm. But you said it there, right? You hope it's natural. Well, when we've had conversations before about the chimp, it wants to be comfortable. It wants to stay and feel safe. But we are doing an event that we've got an emotional investment in because you've done training for it, right? So you've invested your time into it. You have
Put it on social media.
Right? Thing. So it's that way of, okay, well, we already know, right, that you're pushing yourself. That's going to feel uncomfortable, right? Because you're already you're pushing yourself. You're going into that growth zone, right? That growth zone feels uncomfortable. It's not something that we naturally want to do, right? Our ego. I made a post recently about the fact that our ego quits where athletes start, because athletes understand that you can't have growth without discomfort. Okay, but now we know that discomfort is going to happen. We now know, okay, well, actually, I can understand why the chimp's here. I get why these thoughts are coming in, right? And now we can start understanding what the brain is doing and the purpose it's trying to serve. It makes it a little bit easier to do this thing called acceptance that people just throw out there, right? Now, acceptance doesn't mean just grinning it and being like, oh, I feel this, but I don't care. I'm going to push through. Acceptance is like almost the opposite. It's being like, okay, because I've shifted from thinking self to observe self, and I've noticed that this thought's come in, and actually I know that it's natural because I know the role of the brain and what it's trying to do for me now, I can let that thought be there without having to act on it, or without having to like try and wrestle it and being like, I'm feeling nervous. I don't need nerves, or, you know, or it's just excitement, right? You don't have to wrestle it. You can actually just be like, you know what? Almost like, thanks, brain, for bringing this, you know, for bringing this thought into my mind, which is causing this feeling. But actually, I now know through using the human part of my brain and being logical that it isn't actually, it's not useful. It's not helpful to me right now. That makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. So then in terms of like practical tips about how someone would use visualization as a tool for an event day. So I'll use an example because, again, my first road marathon, and you kind of forget how many people are there on the event day. I think in Barcelona there's 30,000 people. And one thing that can be quite frustrating is when you then go to the start line, and it's so hard to get in your rhythm. There's just so many people that are going around. There's people like cutting across you and doing this. So it can be like quite overwhelming in terms of finding a space. So with that in mind, and that's, you know, potentially where my chimp was coming through and thinking, oh, this is an uncomfortable situation, or so many people around me, I can't get into my rhythm. How would someone then go through the steps, and what would they use in terms of visualization to then help with that on event day? Because that's, I guess, something you can account for potentially not all the time.
Exactly right. So it's like, okay, there's going to be some uncontrollable elements in there that you're going to have to come to terms with. And there's, the what if I trip over someone, and what if this happens? But what we can do is start implementing a game plan to make the likelihood of that happening even less. Okay, so you've turned around there and you've noticed, and perhaps if anyone here is training for a marathon, they can, you know, visualize that start line, visualize those first couple of Ks, right, where it's people haven't thinned out yet. And even things like the London Marathon, I know people said that it was really busy for that whole race. So, okay, you know, visualize what's going on there. Okay, well, what can I control in myself that will make the likelihood of tripping over or bumping into someone less likely to happen? And then I call these your wins. So wins are like what's important now. I don't know why I'm still closing my eyes, but wins are what's important now. Okay, so they are controllable things that in the moment you can do that make you feel like you're in control of that situation, which then instills confidence and reinstills that belief system. Okay, so if you're thinking about running in a race, okay, well, what do I first need to look out for? Well, I probably need to look out for gaps within the crowd that I can move into, right? I need to look for who's next to me, and perhaps I need to look ahead at signs that coming up in the road. There's going to be like a blockade, or there's going to be like a funnel that's going to increase the density of people. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. Does that make sense? Right. So you're turning around and saying, okay, this is likely to happen. I need to get good at building the ability to see these things, right? When you're learning how to drive a car, you're having to understand how the roads work, the road signs, etc. But after a while of doing it, it becomes second nature. And that leads me on to my next point is, okay, you've visualized the race, you've understood one of the worries that you're now having. You've now built up, okay, what sort of skills do I need to start implementing when I need to get really good at looking far ahead on the road, looking at potential obstacles, checking to see where the gaps in the crowd are. These are some of the control things you can start doing that give you that sense of power. Now, the next thing is, how can I put myself into and induce situations where that's likely to occur, where I can develop that skill, where there isn't any pressure on me? Okay, so Dave, where could you potentially go and do that?
Run club in London, that's probably as busy as Barcelona Marathon at times.
Right. So there you go, right? Okay, I need to go and find myself a popular or a decent run club in London where I can go, where run club in particular, or any run club that goes through a city, right? Not only are you going to be dealing with, you know, people around you and trying to have conversations I doubt you'll be doing if you're trying to push yourself on marathon day. Maybe have a couple of chats, but no in-depth conversations, right, with people you're running with. You've got pavements and roads to think about.
Traffic lights.
You've got traffic lights. You've got actual moving cars to think about. So when we start thinking about, right, well, this is one thing that I was worried about come event day, and we've just unpacked that a little bit because you expressed that when you actually did the visualization, you thought about what nerves came into you on the day. Okay, now we've thought about the skill I need to develop. Now we've thought about where can I go and start implementing that skill. And then when you think rationally, you think, actually, if I go to a run club on the regular, and I start building these skills, actually there's way more going on at that run club than there would be on race day. So again, it's actually probably illogical to think that that's then going to become a big problem, a big issue for you.
Yeah, definitely. And already, I guess, you know, I can start to see the value in just assessing those risks, because something is going to crop up that you didn't plan for. And I guess this is building that skill to then learn how to deal with these, you know, these unprecedented events. And then just as you mentioned before, controlling what you can control and stacking those wins, because you're like, okay, so I've actually done that right, even though that hasn't gone to plan. This is something that I can control that I've done, and therefore I'm on track, right?
Exactly it, yeah. And that's really good. And my next thing for people, and again, I guess the next win that you can start implementing when you're prepping for the event is, Dave, when do you think like race prep really, in terms of like when you're actually thinking about race day itself, in the impact of race day, when do you think that actually really occurs? Like the mega, obviously you have all the training you need to do, but in terms of you've done the training and now it's, you know, you've got to your let's say you've got the actual race coming up this week. When does you know, the impact, when can you start really impacting the likelihood of you having a successful event or competition?
Well, I would say the earlier you can think about it, obviously you can get more considerations in there. And again, that could be actually planning the practicalities about when you put your bib up. And again, we're using marathon days as an example here, but it can be anything. So it's when can you actually, you know, think about the logistics of the event and making that as easy as possible. For me, in terms of actually, you know, thinking about doing the event itself, that would probably be from a few days out.
Yeah, exactly. So I always work on almost like it's different if you're abroad, because obviously you need to make sure you're taking everything with you. But say you're already there and you've brought all the stuff, right? You've got a really important 24-hour window. Okay. And our 24-hour window covers, I call it like the big three. So you've got your S&C, like strength and conditioning, you've got your nutrition, and then you've got your like mindset and mental side. And the reason why that's so important is because when we again can make sure we're controlling these three areas, come actual, again, like working back from how you want to feel on race day, you're most likely going to feel your best if you've ticked those three boxes, right? So if you're making sure you're having good, nutritious meals on that 24-hour build up, that's already one potential doubt that could come into your mind in that, oh, have I eaten enough? Have I eaten the right thing? Etc. Right? So again,
not trying any new gels or anything like that for
not trying any new gels. That's one of the big ones. And I remember someone turning around saying, not trying any new foods, right? So probably don't have a meal the night before in like something that you've not tried before, but because you're abroad, you think, oh, I'm going to give it a go. Don't do that. Save it for afterwards.
Yeah.
Right. But what we're doing here, right, is we're looking for the the potential for your brain to offer any bits of doubt, right? You're giving like almost undeniable bits of evidence there that can then counteract some of these little unhelpful thoughts around like, oh, have I fueled enough? Well, you know you've fueled enough, right? The next bit, like physically on the day, you're going to be probably hyper aware of any niggle, any little bit of soreness, any strain that you might potentially feel. Well, how would you combat that, Dave?
Well, making sure that resting and obviously having a plan to go in before. With running, again, using an example, could be tapering before the event, and then doing mobility, stretching, obviously focusing on any problem areas and going forward from there. Luckily, fingers crossed, haven't had to deal with that for event days, but obviously I know a lot of people do.
Yeah, exactly, fantastic. And again, just like the food bit, don't go and try like some crazy yoga class, right? Keep the stretches nice and basic. Just make sure you're keeping yourself loosened up. But again, this all goes back into your long-term prep for the event, right? So actually in the months to come, do a like a 24-hour marathon. But I don't mean like do a 24-hour marathon prep in terms of like everything you do, but like, well, like try out some foods, right? In that 24-hour gap. Do some stretches in that 24-hour like window. Say like on one of the weekends, you just want to try this and see how you're going to feel the next day, right? Because again, what we're doing is we're prepping for the event way in advance, okay? And then the final part is by understanding some of those thoughts and feelings that come up, you can start practicing the mental side of actually keeping yourself calm, keeping yourself relaxed, keeping yourself in that positive headspace. So it's that way of again, I spoke to this person that's doing the Ironman and saying, okay, well, what's likely to show up when you get to your hotel room, right? Well, it's going to feel really real then. Fantastic. It's going to feel real. So it's most likely when those unhelpful thoughts are going to start spiking.
Want to become a stronger, better, and faster runner? You don't need another cookie cutter program. You need a coach. Cooper is a coach in your pocket, and they provide real structure, real expertise, and real accountability. And because you're a Move Well, Live Well listener, you'll get an extended 2-week free trial when you sign up and use the code MOVEWELL on the app. Cooper, not a plan, a coach.
Right, that's the first time that they're most likely going to start happening. So what do you need to have in plan as like in your game plan or in your locker that you can then pull on to minimize the impact of that spike and to reduce the likelihood of a spiral happening? And it's like, okay, I need to have my social support network with me so I can just turn around to, in their case, it was their partner, and just say here, like, it's feeling pretty tough now. And they can just naturally distract you through conversation, through playing a game of cards, through going for a walk and just looking at the area around you. The next thing you can start doing is like practicing some like mindfulness based activities. Now I know mindfulness gets chucked out there and it's like really washy and it feels really nice and people talk about it, but the reason why it's utilized so much is because again, when we realize that we're getting caught up in here, what we want to do is get ourselves from being in here to back out here in the external world, right? Rather than wrestling with thoughts that are in here. And what mindfulness does is it sort of forces our brain from shifting and like focusing on this to focusing on being out there. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So the classic ones that people do, and especially night before a race, I'd really recommend doing a body scan. And you can listen to like an audio clip on YouTube. There's some really good ones out there when you're lying in bed and someone will talk to you, and they'll go right from your feet all the way up from your head, forcing you to focus on like sensory elements. Okay. And the reason why you want to focus on sensory elements is because it takes up energy of your brain. So it cannot be like forcing you to focus on different thoughts and different feelings. Now, your brain will inevitably shift onto them, but it's your job to pick up on that and say, here, being distracted, I need to come back to the audio cue, right, that we spoke about before. Another one you can do is obviously breathing is so important because it actually really helps resync our nervous system, as well as also give our brain something to focus on. And it slows down the heart rate, resets a nice rhythm within us, which is why it's so important and so impactful. Another one I really like is the 5 senses. So it's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can taste, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, right? And again, it's something that will take time and it will take up energy. And again, what you're looking to do is we're stopping that spiral from happening and we're almost hitting like a reset, right? And then once you've done your reset, you then go and focus on your wins, which we've just been speaking for a little bit of. Does that make sense, Dave?
Makes sense. I love that. I like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I've never done the sensory the audio clip,
body scan,
the body scan.
Yeah,
I'd be interested to try that. Actually, I might give that a go for my next event. I think that's good.
Yeah, it's good. Another one that's my personal favorite is like mindful music. So it's like find like a favorite song, probably an upbeat song, or like please don't start listening to like Codaline or something like that. But find like an upbeat song where it has like lots of instruments and lots of like vocals in it. And your job is to try and like name every instrument you can hear and name like, oh, okay, like is that piano? Is it guitar? Is it violin? Is that a male or female voice? Are there backing singers? And again, you're like really like letting yourself like be surrounded by the music. And again, what you're doing is you're pulling yourself out of this spiral that's happening. Okay.
I like that. And that sounds like a really good way to potentially manage some anxiety or any kind of like panic attacks or unhelpful feelings that kind of arise.
Precisely, right? So what we're looking at here, and again, link, because people are probably thinking, how on earth is this helping me to the event? But again, right, prepping for the event in that 24-hour window, we're now giving you the tips that you can actually start falling on. So that means that when it comes to actual race day, okay, and your mind starts giving you some of these bits of doubt, or it starts playing like, oh, but what about this and what about that? You have now stacks of undeniable evidence that you've put yourself in the best position possible for that event.
100%. So we've spoken a lot there about obviously the event day, whatever that is. Then let's speak about prep and actually the training or building up the habits and the routines in actually order to get to that event day. So what would be your recommendations there, and how do people best prep for their event, whatever that might be?
Yeah, so again, it's really difficult to get myself out of like the running headspace, right? But it's having those process goals in place so that when it comes up to the event, often I'll work with footballers that are building up for a trial. So it's like, right, trial, you want to have this skill developed. Okay, well, let's work backwards from that. Okay, how many times, like, what are the process goals you need to hit on your build up to being able to know that when you step up to take, for example, a free kick in your trial, it's most likely going to be, you know, you're going to be able to execute that skill at your best. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to actually be ensuring that I'm maybe, you know, hitting the target, shifting from 4 times out of 10 to like 7, 8 times out of 10. Okay, so there's a process goal that goes along that. Okay, and the process goal is after every training session, I need to start doing, you know, this many free kicks. So I start building up that motor connection, right, between the mind and the body. The more you do it, the more that connection is built up through the nervous system, and those motor neurons get stronger. Okay, we know that as a fact. So, okay, I need to actually, again, work backwards and start setting in the process goals that make it more likely that that outcome goal will be achieved. That makes sense.
100%. And I think, you know, it's there. It's obviously speaking about the process. And again, we will take it back to the running context, because I can kind of give you guys a bit of an example. Because training for Barcelona Marathon, I was then working back from, okay, so this event day, March the 21st. Okay, what can I do within my training? So for me, it was 3 runs a week, making sure that I do an easy run, a tempo run, and a long run and a weekend. And that wasn't like someone telling me you need to do X amount of runs. That was me reverse engineering, thinking about my life, my work commitments, my personal commitments, and thinking, okay, I can realistically do 3 training sessions a week and going back from there. So then you're also thinking, okay, so how am I fueling this properly? I might have bigger proportion of carbs within my diet, so I can actually fuel those long runs, particularly on those long runs. So then, okay, am I sleeping properly? Am I hydrating? Am I doing, so for someone that went from doing maybe 4 sessions a week, dial that down so I could then fit everything in. So then I was doing 3 strength sessions and then 3 runs a week. So I was then reverse engineering at how do I fit everything within that? And that's what we're talking about in terms of prep. So Obviously, that's one example in terms of running, but for your wedding day, it could be okay. So how if you're wanting to lose a couple of stone, it's how do I achieve that sustainable fat loss? Okay, I can then go about tracking my calories and my food intake and slowly building habits. It could be adding 2K steps every day in terms of my step count and then building that up. It could be adding in some gym sessions around that. So then we're actually thinking about okay, so that's this many weeks to the event, and then going forward from there. So we're not leaving everything last minute. We've got a nice clear plan. We're reverse engineering back and then thinking about, okay, what can I realistically fit into this? And it's kind of funny because my Berlin prep, which I'm running this weekend, I haven't been able to stick to my 3 sessions. Barcelona, I was unbelievably locked in. I wasn't going out, wasn't drinking. So for me, that was very realistic in terms of getting that. But for this time, it's been summer. Been super busy with plans, been going out like 3 or 4 times a week. So I haven't been able to hit all my training sessions. But actually, and then in terms of this event, so then you've got to think about how much you've been prepping and what you've been able to allocate to that. So I can actually go into this event with a lot less pressure because I know that I'm potentially not going to be that time. But ultimately, I'm okay with that because whatever you put in terms of prepping to the event is what you'll get out of that. And what we want you to consider as well is that the stuff that you were doing in order to prep for that event, is that long-term sustainable? Is that sustainable on a long-term process? Because ultimately, if it's not, then potentially you're setting yourself up to, not continue that after the event or whatever it is.
Yeah, and it's a nice reflection there that Dave has had around the fact that actually it's been summer, there's been other priorities. Unlike with Barcelona, that was a big priority for you and you managed to lock in for it. Berlin, slightly different, right? Perhaps you're going there for a different reason, there's different motives involved, but also you've recognized that your life has changed since Barcelona. So you've had higher demands, but also what you've wanted to get out of life has shifted as well. And I think you've even done a post about that, I think.
Yeah, before. I did. And that's exactly it. And ultimately you as the individual can decide, what is your main priority right now. And this is what we would ask you guys to consider in terms of your event. And, for a lot of people, they want to be in the best shape of their lives for their wedding day. And again, so it's okay, can you realistically hit that? Can you allocate the resources to it? Are you in a good headspace to be able to push towards that? That kind of goes for any event or presentation or running event or whatever it is.
Yeah, brilliant. If it is something such as a wedding, it's again that idea of using your social environment. So turning around to your partner and saying, look, this is going to be something that's really important to me. I don't want to look back on my wedding day and think, what if I'd just been a bit more consistent? So they can perhaps, lean on them for the support. You don't have to do it all by yourself. Can you actually use your, I don't know, groomsmen or bridesmaids to help you with that as well? And say that you all want to reach a goal and make it like more of a community-based thing where you're all working together on that. You've also got that idea again, like you said, like building habits into it. So I think last episode ties really nicely onto this episode, and that idea of, how can you look at the event, look at where you want to get to, look at taking the steps backwards, look at what barriers are in place, how can I overcome those barriers, what can I pull on from the episode we discussed before around habit building, around cues, around environments, around just reducing barriers in general.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point in terms of making it as easy as possible. And what we'd also get to consider is what is the minimum habit that you can get started with today that actually is realistic that you can fit in. And also, I think it's important that you consider some flexibility within that plan because yes, it's great, 12 weeks leading up to this event, but as we know, life gets in the way. So it's important that you've also considered flexibility because a lot of what we can see sometimes is when people make this plan, they think they have to stick to it 100%, when in actual reality, 80% consistency is definitely enough to get you to where you want to be in terms of prepping.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's a really good point. And Dave, is there anything else you think we need to cover or hammer home to our listeners around their prep for events?
Well, I think that, the events themselves, they're not, they're motivators, but they're not kind of this like magic bullet to solve all your problems. And it's important to make sure that you've considered the whole holistic prep. And again, I'd really, get you to consider whether the means that you are doing in terms of the training in order to get to this event? Is it sustainable? Are you enjoying it? Will it get you to where you want to be on event day? And yeah, as I said, what's the minimum habits that you can do in order to help you get there?
Yeah, brilliant. And also on that build up to the event day, celebrate those small process goals, those small little outcome goals that will help you, go towards that long-term overall goal of how you're going to want to feel and how you want that event to look to make it more likely that you're going to succeed. And I think the thing for me is really, spending time visualizing how you're going to feel, what that event's going to feel like, and then looking at, okay, I'm going to feel this way. I'm going to have doubts about this. Well, what can I do working backwards to minimize the likelihood of that thought or that feeling having as much of an impact or that doubt being there in the first place?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I guess one final thought that I'd like to kind of close off as well is people can often forget about finding enjoyment in the prep and the process itself, because your prep shouldn't be about punishment, or it shouldn't be about doing the thing because you have to do it. We really want to change your mindset and think, prep is about building that confidence for that event day, and everything that you've done to get there is all about proving to yourself that you can, because that's going to make the whole process and the event day a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, fantastic. I think it's a brilliant message. And do we have any questions that we can ask our listeners to try and keep them in that healthy headspace and to keep them thinking about these important skills and topics that we discussed today?
Well, as you know, we've always got questions for our listeners that we want you guys to consider, and potentially, hopefully, this will lead to action as well. So what we got for you this week, question number 1. If your event was tomorrow, what would you wish that you'd started doing sooner? And this comes down to the prep side of it, right? And then, because often we see, gets to the week of the event, oh, I just wish I did this, or I just wish I'd started this sooner. Well, as we mentioned, what's the minimum bit that you can get started with today? And that could just be planning. It could just be considering how many weeks you've got and then reverse engineering and starting that process back from there.
Yeah, a brilliant question. I think, again, that will really... it's tapping into a little bit of that visualization bit of like, put yourself in your shoes come race day, come the actual event. And we need to really get on top of only using running metaphors. But yeah, really, how can you put yourself in those shoes so that you're like, oh God, this is how I'm going to feel. And then it's already going to trigger that motivation to start putting in place, habits, putting in place the actual toolkit so that when it comes to the real event, that those feelings are no longer there.
100%. Okay, so question number 2, and again, this is an open question for you guys and something for you to consider. What's important to you is, when you look back at your event day, what would you regret more? Being underprepared or burning yourself out to the point of exhaustion, trying to be perfect? And again, we cannot answer this question for you. That is something that you've got to consider yourself. And finally, question number 3. Is the way that you're preparing for your event right now something that you can sustain long after the event has finished? And again, this is the whole point about, is what you're doing sustainable? Is it something that will fit in around your lifestyle? Or are you just kind of having this all or nothing approach where everything in your life is then hinging on this one event? And ultimately, a lot of your feelings about the event will be determined by how successful or not that you were on this event day. But again, what we want you to think about is the process, about the enjoying it, not seeing it as a punishment, and just ultimately building confidence that even if things don't go to plan on event day, you've still proved to yourself that you can train for something and do it properly and control of everything that you can control, even if it doesn't always go to plan.
Yeah, I love that. And it's something that I see a lot, especially in high performers. I see this a lot where they've really tied their identity to whether they can win or whether they can perform on the day, rather than actually focusing more on, as you said there, the values, the characteristics, the traits of who you're going to be. I always say that actual come event day, it's a celebration of who you are and who you've turned into, not what the outcome is going to be, because that is a lot of the time that's something that you cannot control. But what you can control and what you can be proud of is everything you've done leading up to that point. And again, it's shifting it away from only valuing yourself in terms of what that achievement, what that goal looks like, rather than actually taking into account the person you become through the process, which is so much more important. And equally, when I look at athletes that I've admired, or when I look at role models that I've admired, it's not because of like the fact that they have won something, because thousands, even millions of people have won something in their life, and I don't admire all of them. It's the person that they are and how they carry themselves and how they've worked towards achieving that actually inspires me. And when I look at them, I'm inspired by them.
Yeah, and ultimately, you know, when we talk about an event day, like everybody can have an off day. Everybody can have a day where they turn up and everything's firing and they feel absolutely amazing. But to Tony's point, some of your most favorite people that you look up to, they have off days as well. And if you hinge your entire value or your entire self-worth or your entire competence on that one event day, ultimately you could be setting yourself up to failure, because we all have our off days. And if we all got judged on our very worst days, then, you know, people would think a lot less of us. But that's not who we are. It's the process. It's how we then come and bounce back from that if we do have that off day as well.
Yeah, brilliant. It's that idea I put in people's heads that actually the more you want to win or the more you want to achieve a goal, the less likely you are, because of the actual internal pressures you're then placing on yourself. So that's something just to think about is, you know, would I view a friend differently, you know, if they didn't successfully achieve at this event, or they didn't successfully reach this goal? Probably not. So then why are you placing that internal pressure on yourself?
Boom. Love that. And as always, we like to finish with a quote that we have for you guys. Tony, it's your week this week. What have you got for us?
Of course, this quote is going to be related towards the mental side. So this quote is, "The mind is like water. When it is agitated, it's difficult to see through. But when it settles, the answer becomes clear."
I love that. And again, like, this is the whole idea of sometimes when you're so much in it and all you can think about is this, you know, what's going to happen? What's the immediate impact of taking an action? Sometimes you can't actually see the long-term vision or where you want to get to, because, as I say, as the quote says, you're so agitated, everything's cloudy, your vision is cloudy. But when you can take that step back, when you can calm down, when you just let things happen and be in their place, that's quite often when you can see the finish line, and then you've got that mental clarity to really push forward and make progress.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I think for me, it really speaks to that idea of developing those tools and those tricks, and to be able to just take that step back and be a little bit less, as you said, like in it and involved in it. Just take a step back, whether that's going and doing like a relaxing activity, whether it's going and speaking to someone about it, or whether it is literally just going away and coming back to it later so you can see it in a clearer headspace. Like, honestly, it's something that I try and do in life is not react in the moment and try and react a little bit later on. Am I great at it? Definitely not. Am I getting better at it? Hopefully. You'll have to ask some of my close friends and my girlfriend as well.
Bosh. Unreal. Really happy with that episode, mate. Thank you all to everybody that's been listening. As always, subscribe, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Whoever's prepping for their event, if you want to let us know how you best prep for your events, obviously drop us a message on Instagram and all that good stuff. And we will see you guys in the next episode.
Cheers, everyone.